Hello, this is ProbableLoss. I'm back again, and I had to take a little break after casting all of those other games, and this one, as well as all of the games that are going to follow this one, are going to be a little bit differently. I already got some feedback from some of the people who watched the videos, and they didn't like it when I broke it down. A lot of people were basically saying that I should not be trying to be Day 9, where I break down the video and describe exactly what's happening. Nice drone split. So I'm going to try not to do that. I think I'm just going to go straight through every video. I'm not going to pause it at all. I'm just going to load the entire video up to YouTube. I just verified my account, so I should be able to upload more than 15 minutes at a time. So hopefully that works, and what we'll get is whole games uninterrupted by my nonsense. This is going to be a ZvZ between Frank and November. So we're going to see what happens. Okay, so this will be another cold cast. This is another game that I haven't viewed yet. This was sent to me by, I believe, November. I could be wrong though. I will put that in the description. But both players, neither one look like they're going to really go for any sort of 10 to 12 pull. If they were they were going to go for that type of thing, we would probably see it already. But November is already getting out his Overlord, as is Frank. So standard play out of both players so far. Although for Zerg, it's, I guess, worth mentioning that standard play could be considered 6 to 10 pull. There's a lot of cheese in ZvZs, especially on the ladder currently. Little Zerg, Ling, drone. That's not a Zergling. Looks like Frank is saving up for his spawning pool. Probably going to lay it down right here. So Frank's pool is going to be slightly early. Well, November's spawning pool came down. Frank is going for a fast expand, which versus Zerg can be pretty risky, just because getting that spawning pool first and getting out the first Zerglings can be pretty devastating for you if you fast expand and the other person really commits to putting that pressure on. So depending on how much pressure November can put on Frank right now, is it's going to change up the matchup a lot. Or it could change up the matchup a lot. But it doesn't look like November is saving up any larvae to hatch these Zerglings. He is getting out... Yeah, he's not saving any larvae at all. So this spawning pool isn't going to be able to be used for any pressure to sort of punish Frank for going this fast expansion. So Frank is going to get this expansion up, and he should be at a pretty significant lead simply because he was able to expand and November wasn't. However, November can get an early queen out, which means that he will have more larvae faster than Frank will. But I would assume that Frank would try to get out a queen as quickly as possible at this main base, possibly even at the natural. So Frank quickly sending 2 drones over to his natural. Gonna build a spine crawler and hopefully actually get this one to work, because Frank is way behind on the harvesters. So November actually not doing too bad, even though Frank has that expansion up already. But Frank wasn't spending very many minerals there at one point. He had a few larvae that he could have spent stuff on, but he, I guess, just opted not to. So now Frank is doing this really awkward thing where he's got this fast expand, but is just massing up Zerglings to the point where he has even a lot more Zerglings than November does. So this weird sort of, I guess, psyching out build that November did, where Frank sees that he put down his spawning pool at 14. He probably thinks that November is going to be pushing out here anytime now. So he's just sitting out here with these Lings waiting, thinking that he probably has an advantage in the income and whatnot, when he actually doesn't, simply because November sort of faked pressure. But November is going to be getting up his Baneling nest, and yeah, Frank is not. So I would assume that Frank is just going to be building drones here. He is getting out Metabolic Boost. I'm not sure if Frank already finished his Metabolic Boost, so Frank has that upgrade advantage. November, is Ling going to come in here, do a little bit of scouting? Probably isn't going to get to see much. Yeah, that's just too many Zerglings, even for a Speedling to deal with. And November's income is just putting Frank's to shame, especially right now in the early game in a ZvZ. Any mirror matchup where you have this much discrepancy in the income is going to make a huge difference later on in the game. So unless Frank does something right now to hurt November's economy, he's going to be in a world of hurt. And he really can't even do anything now that these Banelings are up, unless he has some killer micro with these Lings, which are going to be Speedlings soon. Metabolic Boost is almost done for Frank. His own Baneling Nest is almost done, but really this matchup a lot of times comes down to Ling Baneling micro, especially in the early game. So we'll see if either player can get some good hits off. I believe that it was last game I cast, I showed a situation where two Banelings could have killed almost 20 or so drones, and Frank is going to be morphing in only 4 Banelings here. Whenever you are a Zerg in this situation, you want to send Banelings in pairs of 2. It's the most efficient you can send them in because 2 Banelings will kill any amount of other Banelings. So right there you see, because he had his Banelings grouped up, one Baneling did a ton of damage to all 4 of them, while another one did a little bit of damage. But picking off that Baneling right there is going to be a little win for Frank right there. And that Baneling just tanks a hit for the other Zergling, so good managing there. I can tell already that my sound is a little bit too high, so I'm going to have to change that a little bit. Okay, that should help a little bit. Okay, so Frank actually dealt a little bit more damage than I'd expected him to, but he really needs to deal this damage. If I were November, I would have just drone attacked to get the immediate results of killing those Lings off, and Frank saw all that huge swell of Lings and opted not to attack, which I believe is the right move in that situation, because Frank does now have a worker lead. Worker lead that he needs very badly because he was so far behind in the income there for a while. And Frank is also pretty well ahead in the resources lost tab, and by ahead I mean that he has lost less resources, which is good for him because he was behind in the economy. So both players pretty even right now. Frank evening up the score on November, even though November was significantly behind not too long ago. But with a big Baneling hit, he could change a lot. Frank needs to get out of there right now, which he does. Pretty good spotting there. Had Frank left that huge group of Zerglings be hit by these Banelings, the game could have ended right there, because this many Zerglings would have just died. I'm having some issues with the camera, so I'm going to try to use the arrow keys and see how that works for a little bit at least. Nah, that's not going to work. So Frank has a good defense set up here, has a partial wall in with Banelings at every corner, so that's good. November has a slight, he has more of a, just a defensive position, while this is sort of a wall-in-ish resembling thing. Okay, Frank got one of November's Banelings picked off, which is good. The Baneling count is now down to 2 for him. So Frank, good pick there on that Baneling. Frank is slightly behind in the workers again, which is not that big of a deal now that we're entering this stage of the game. Roaches are going to be coming out for... Or was I just seeing things? I guess neither player has roaches. Did someone cancel it? November is getting a Spire. And, oh, Frank got the roaches. Okay, that's what I saw. Unfortunately for Frank, he's not really going to have much air defense. He could get Spore Crawlers, which he needs to do. 9 Mutalisks on the way for November. This could be game-ending. There's nothing Frank can do to be prepared. This is almost going to force a base race scenario where what Frank needs to do is just send these roaches across the map to try to make November defend against these roaches with his Mutalisks, so that Frank has enough time to get up enough spore crawlers to defend himself. Unfortunately for him, though, he just doesn't have the resources to put up a ton of spore crawlers at once. His income, however, well, actually, both players' income is pretty high. Not too sure why Frank's income is so much lower. Maybe looks like he's a little oversaturated in the main, but as soon as he sees these Mutalisks, he puts down tons of spore crawlers. Like I said, this could be game ending. This is a lot of Mutalisks. I believe 10 Mutalisks right now. If they don't allow any spore crawlers to finish, that is game over. All of these Zerglings go in there. They're going to try to do some damage, try to force November's overreaction, but November isn't buying it. Just going to kill off all of these workers. Units lost. Can I actually bring up the unit? Okay, I can. Workers killed. 16 workers killed. Okay, November does go for a sort of overreaction. Really, in this situation, I would allow some of my base to die before bringing my Mutalisks back. Doing this is sort of a waste because he's letting Frank get enough time to put up spore crawlers, which are really good against Mutalisks. I believe spore crawlers have +2 base armor. I could be wrong. They have +1 base armor. Spines have +2. My mistake. But either way, every armor that they have makes these Mutalisks that much less effective against these, because well, not most, a good bit of the Mutalisk DPS comes from the bouncing Glaive Worm. So by the last Glaive Worm, it's dealing 0 damage because it bounces once, does 3 damage, and then bounces again and does 1 damage. So that last damage only does 1, so it's doing 8, 2, and then 0, which is not all that much damage. So Spore Crawlers are pretty good against Mutalisks. You can see almost picks off 1 Mutalisks there, and these 2 alone are enough to scare off a flock of Mutalisks that big, simply because this is only 125 minerals, counting the drone cost. So whenever you're losing 100-100 in an even trade-off with these, it's not really an even trade-off. Yeah, you're killing the defense, but these Mutalisks could be doing things that are more safe, less risky. And yeah, you could end the game right now if you tried to use that. But he's safer just doing what he's doing right now, which is picking off the overlords, picking off the tech, picking off random pieces of Frank's army. And Frank actually has no army, so he's just going to go all in with the Zerglings, and that looks like it will probably be a good game. I can't see Frank recovering. Frank GG's and taps out. So, again, what you see is not very good scouting on Frank's part. If Frank had seen the Spire, he would have been able to react better. Another thing that Frank could have done was tech to Infestors or Hydralisks. In any ZvZ, I usually tech the Hydralisks because they're actually pretty good in the matchup. If you have Hydralisk Infestor against Roach, you're usually going to be pretty well off. But that's usually because you can get an advantage earlier on so that you can actually afford to produce that many gas-heavy units. But yeah, just poor scouting kind of led to Frank's loss.